Mitt Romney, of course, the former Republican nominee. In the moment, as he was speaking, it felt historic indeed. It will cement Senator Romney's legacy and stain what the White House was no doubt hoping would be a clean party line acquittal today, despite the party's refusal to hear from witnesses or admit new documents into evidence. Democrats are taking pains to draw a distinction likely to become a refrain in the coming weeks and months that today's acquittal does not equal an exoneration for the president, who will remain impeached forever.
When he spoke about the oath he took to God. And and he is really a man of faith, and his faith had a lot to do with his inability just to brush it off and say, oh, it's politics. It would be politically bad for me to go against Trump. Why should I do that? He's going to get acquitted anyhow. He had made a solemn oath, and he took that very seriously, and that's a rare thing. And if that's a rare thing.
Garrett Haake, who came to know him, said that it was central to his life.
And to who he was. A
lot of the other 99 insist that faith is central to their lives.
Right.
They were not so burdened by the oath.
But, Wolf, one of the things that Mitt Romney did today, besides showing to many Americans that this was a profile in courage and that there's still room for mavericks here in Washington, he did rob the Republicans, did rob the president of a key talking point. They have been saying all along that this was a partisan impeachment exercise. That is obviously no longer the case.
George Conway, Mitt Romney, the only Republican in the Senate to vote in favor of removing President Trump from office. He's talked about feeling sometimes as though he was on another universe, than his Republican colleagues when the facts were presented. You're a conservative attorney, and I suspect that you have you can relate to that emotion, the idea of being in a different universe than your Republican friends.
Absolutely, and the verdict of history is going to be on Mitt Romney's side.
Before casting his vote to convict on abuse of power, Mitt Romney, the Republican Party standard bearer, just 8 years ago, think about this, delivered some emotional remarks from the floor of the United States Senate.
I take an oath before God as enormously consequential. I knew from the outset that being tasked with judging the president, the leader of my own party, would be the most difficult decision I have ever faced.
Well, the calls for censure now sort of obsolete. In many ways, Mitt Romney's vote to convict, a bipartisan vote of conviction, may be the censure, may be more effective than any censure the United States Senate could come up with. Jeff, do you think that in some ways Mitt Romney had an influence on them?
I think so. I mean, to hear him speak so slowly, haltingly, deliberately, emotionally about why he was voting to convict on that first article of impeachment, I mean, it was really something. And then if you also take into account the pre-taped interview he gave to another network, he explained
I'm gonna play a little bit of that in a minute.
He explains one of the reasons why the vote weighed so heavily on him was because that he was acutely aware of the blowback that not just he would get, but that his wife would face, his sons, his daughters-in-law, his 24 grandkids would face, the vindictiveness from President Trump and Trump allies. So he was fully aware of that, but still, on the principal point, and because of the oath that he says he made before God, he saw fit to convict on that first article of impeachment.
All right. I want to play an extended excerpt here of Mitt Romney, who gave his first television interview to the network where he had to explain away to Republicans what he was doing. It's a Fox News interview. Here's a clip.
The personal consequences, the political consequences that fall on me as a result of that are going to be extraordinary. But I swore an oath before God, and I'm a religious person, that I would apply impartial justice. And applying impartial justice said what the president did was grievously wrong. And I had to vote if I was going to live with my own conscience in a way that was consistent with that oath of office.
So, gentlemen, the way I want to conduct this conversation, I want you both to think of it this way. John, the long-term historical consequences, the long-term legal consequences with you, Neil. So, John, I'll give you the first shot at this. I know you've been talking a little bit more, so your thoughts are pretty fresh. Where are we?
I think we're in the midst of the storm, and it's a storm that is shaped by some of the worst manifestations of perennial American forces. And I think if you want to understand where we are, and sometimes God just gives you the contrast right in front of you, you don't have to work very hard. Contrast last night with the president's speech, the refusal to shake the hand of the Speaker of the House, and everything that brought him to that moment, and then contrast it with both what Senator Romney said today and what Senator Schumer said.
And John Meacham, Mitt Romney. You know, I thought about this. I thought he would vote to convict. My gut was he was going to, because in some ways, it's sort of you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar. And maybe he's the only guy that's president of the Republican resistance for now. But where there's one, more could come.
And it's a great, he's a little like Fortinbras in Act 5 of Hamlet, right? He is an emblem of an older order. His father was sitting on the stage as the governor of Michigan at the University of Michigan when LBJ announced the Great Society. George Romney comes out of that Eisenhower, George H.W. Bush, Bill Scranton, part of the Gerald
Service
Ford,
to country above party.
That is no more.
Yeah.
And it actually, you know what? There was a lot wrong with those days, but there was a lot right as well. And he brought the best of that to this day. He's changed his place in history. I think he deserves an immense amount of credit today. And I think his colleagues who didn't see it that way will come to regret it.
I go after Republicans a lot.
I didn't notice that.
And except for this guy. But I have to tip my cap to what Mitt Romney did. Because what Mitt Romney did, he put country before politics in a way that I think...
there's nobody else that has had that casts a tougher vote. Nobody else in that Senate cast a tougher vote. And not Joe Manchin, not Doug Jones.
Courage.
Nobody did.
Absolute courage, and we should applaud that when we see it, because what he did, I think, will ring through the ages. But he's also an endangered man, so I'm gonna go online and give some money to his reelection.
And I say this as a warning to the entire Romney family.
Yeah.
The Team Trump is going to feel incentivized to make this as painful as possible for the Romneys in ways that I don't think people have fully imagined, because this is Trump's way. This is how he keeps people in line in his mind.
Proceed, Governor. That was Barack Obama's taunt at Mitt Romney in their 2012 presidential debate. And today, Mitt Romney proceeded into history. In a profile in Courage, Utah Senator Mitt Romney became the first and only U.S. senator in American history to vote in favor of removing the president of his own party. What do you make of this vote by Senator Romney today for conviction and removal from office?
Well, hi, Chris. It's great to be with you. And I was in my office and had the television on mute. I turned it up when I saw Mitt come on. And I have to admit, it's been a rough couple of weeks, and I didn't have high hopes. But when I heard him explain with such elegance and simplicity his ethical decision, tears came to my eyes. And it was gave me some hope in what has been a pretty dark couple of weeks. You could see him being willing to buck the fear that I think has been so dominant in the way that Trump has ruled the Senate. And I love that he did it with such humility.
Well, Senator, this is what Jack Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, is all about. It's the senator who stands up against his own party or her own party. How difficult is that to do? Can you imagine what it's like for Romney right now, the hatred he's probably getting from the president's family, if not anyone else?
Well, he is being exposed to all sorts of hatred and vitriol, and
In an interview with Chris Wallace on Fox News today, Senator Romney recognized the significance of his decision today. Here he is.
You talk about the consequences. You realize this is war. Donald Trump will never forgive you for this.
There's a hymn that is sung in my church. It's an old Protestant hymn, which is, do what is right, let the consequence follow. I know in my heart that I'm doing what's right. I understand there's going to be enormous consequence, and I don't have a choice in that regard. That's why I haven't been anxious to be in the position I'm in.
Senator Smith, I know from experience there's certain people who find a return to their religion more comfortable after they get out of politics, because politics forces you to make decisions that don't always square with your religion, and that's a terrible fact of life. In this case, he's responding to his religious impulse while in office. What makes it so dramatic is saying, I'm choosing my belief in God and my faith over the political pressures being applied to me as I speak. That's rare. Your thoughts?
Well, there is such a drive to get power and keep power. And so to see people who make decisions based on what they know is right, that's what we want. That's what this country needs.
Write the epitaph for what happened today, for history. The epitaph.
Well, you know, Chairman Schiff last week, I think, maybe put it best, or actually earlier this week. I'm kind of losing track of the days here, but I think it was during our closing on Monday when he said, you know, is there not one among you who's willing to have the courage to stand up? And he was speaking to the Republican senators in the room when he said that. And there was one among them. You know, Senator Romney stood up, showed courage. You know, for me, this is a story about courage. It's a story about people who are willing to do the right thing and put their oath first. There are always going to be those who don't do it. There's always going to be those who don't stand up and run away from the fight instead of running to it. But the story is not about those folks. The story is about the few who are willing to show the courage and stand up. And that's certainly what certain Democratic senators did today, as well as Mitt Romney.